So I got to be real honest with you. The Genesis chapter 5 isn't the most exciting chapter in the Bible. Yeah, it's a begat. It's one of those begat chapters. But then what happened was I just spent so much time sort of reading and looking at some stuff that it was too late. I have to go with it. All right, so here we are. But really what I was looking at and what kind of interested me about it, and we talked a little bit about this last week. Anyhow, let me just read a verse before I go on. It says, this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that Adam created man, he made him in the likeness of God. So I kind of brought this up, I think, last week. And you're going to see that these guys lived a real long time. You know, they lived 800-900 years, that sort of thing. Yes, I actually do believe it's a 365 day a year. And I know that is somewhat. We brought that up and I said something, I think I said something about it last week, and I really don't understand because I'm really not that smart scientifically, but I did read some stuff about that last week, and they were saying something about, now I've almost forgot. Is it the genes or something? And they hadn't. What's the word I'm looking for? I used it last week. Mutated. They hadn't mutated or something because it was so close to creation, so that they were still a pretty pure genealogical people. That's why they lived so long. That's also why they could have relations with a sister. You know, in the case of like Cain and the early ones, you know, and it didn't cause problems, and so there was that. But the other thing is that, and I think I brought this up. The thing that I was looking at this week is, you really can get a sense of the explosion of the population, and the reason I say that is because these guys lived 800-900 years, and they would have kids starting around 100 years. And so if you think of it like that, they could literally have 5 generations themselves. You know, they could have 5 kids in their hundreds, and then 5 kids in their 200s. You know, they could literally have 5 generations. And so you can just see how this could just build and build, and you could really have a population explosion that could happen, you know, pretty fast, relatively fast. So we get here the genealogy of Adam, in chapter 5, verse 1, it says, this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. So this is kind of interesting. I say it's kind of interesting. Again, I got bogged down in reading a bunch of stuff about this, so I'm just having to go with it. So, of course, we attribute the first 5 books of the Bible to Moses. They are the books of Moses. And certainly Moses wrote them, put them together, you know, whatever. But in the early parts of Genesis, of course, this is you know, you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, of years before Moses ever existed. So he had to gather this information from somewhere. He had to have it from somewhere. And so this says that this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. So it's like he's saying, here is something that was written, and it's Adam's genealogy. And it's possible that, dare I even throw this out there? It's possible that Adam actually wrote this section up to about, some people say up to about 6:9. And then in 6:9, you have it being the genealogy of Noah. And maybe at that point, Noah wrote that part of the genealogy from his line forward. So anyhow, I don't know. That's just some stuff I ran across. But this is the book of the genealogy of Adam, chapter 5, verse 1. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and he blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. So I also do want to do this, and I think I mentioned this way back when it talks about him creating man. But you know, the word Adam and the word man are both the same word, and they literally mean mankind. They literally mean mankind. And so he's saying here that he created mankind. Now I'm not saying that doesn't mean Adam wasn't a real person. I'm just saying that the word means mankind. And obviously he's the father of mankind. So in verse 2, he says he created them male and female, and he blessed them, and he called them mankind in the day that they were created. So here he created them both. Verse 5, so we see that all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. I guess so, right? Yeah. And I skipped verse 4. I probably shouldn't have. It says, after he begot Seth. If you remember last week, we talked about how after Abel was killed, after Cain took off, Eve was given another son, and they called his name Seth. And that was at chapter 4, verse 26. So in verse 4, after he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So he had, he lived 800 years after he had Seth, and after he had Seth, it says that he had more sons and daughters. So again, through all these generations, they had a lot of kids. They had a lot of kids. Verse 5, so all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. So Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. Now don't get confused here, because that's not saying that he only lived 105 years. It's saying that he was 105 years old when he had Enosh, is what it's saying. Is that's how old he was when he had his son Enosh. And then after he begot Enosh, Seth lived 807 years. So he actually lived, 911, 900 and whatever. And he had sons and daughters. And so that's kind of the way it goes on through here. And it's given the genealogy again of Adam. And it's obviously heading to a particular person. In this case, it's obviously heading to Noah. But there's a couple that I want to point out in there. Verse 19, well, I guess I better start in verse 18. Jared lived 162 years, and he begot Enoch. And after he begot Enoch, Jared lived 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. And after he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God for 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So Enoch is pretty popular. I think it's interesting to note that he lived less than anybody, right? He lived 365 years. Yeah. You got me there, Donnie. You got me there. But so Enoch walked with God. So let me just throw this out there. I want you to respond to this. When you see that, and I'm not going to open up to a verse in the Bible and have this answered. So whatever you think is valid. But what does that mean to you when it says that Enoch walked with God?
There's actually, of course, the apocryphal book called the Book of Enoch. And in it, it tells some tall tales. And Enoch was actually chosen to be kind of an intermediary between the watchers, whoever the watchers were. And they actually were supposed to have taught Enoch and walked through him to teach mankind certain skill sets. And so he was supposed to have gone with them.
Okay. So there is a book in the Apocrypha written by Enoch, credited to Enoch. Probably was written by Enoch, but it's just not, in our perspective, not considered canon, not considered biblical. Although there is, and I'm going to throw this out there. somewhere in the New Testament there is a verse from that book that's used about Enoch. I'd have to, seems like I read that. I'd have to look. We're going to probably find it here in a second, but there was that somewhere. But anyhow, what does it mean that Enoch walked with God? What does that mean to you, that he walked with God? He was faithful. Okay. Committed to be righteous. Okay. Right? Did someone completely obedient? Yeah. Someone else?
I just think it means everything.
Okay. Okay. Let's see where I want to start here. Let's do this. Hebrews 11:5. Hebrews 11:5. So this is so this is that roll call of faith. Obviously Enoch is in it. It says in verse 5, it says, by faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. So it says that, I'm sorry, I'm distracted just for a second. All right. It said that he had this testimony that he pleased God. And so that's, you guys are saying a life committed to righteousness, a life of obedience, a life. I often think of, I think he, let's see how it says it over there again. It says he walked with God and he was not, for God took him. So here's what I think when I read that. So you remember we talk about Adam and Eve in the garden, and we talk about God, and you remember God, it says, was walking in the garden, and he was calling, after they had sinned, and he was calling out, where are you? And you sort of get this impression that Adam and Eve, that God came and spent time with Adam and Eve every day. They knew to hide. They said, we heard you walking in the garden, so we were naked and we were ashamed, so we hid ourselves. So I really connect those two things together, Hebrews 11:5, that he pleased God, and sort of God walking with Adam and Eve. And I think there was a real fellowship there between Enoch and God. That there was a very real relationship. And I think all of those things, a commitment to righteousness, obedience, all those things play a part of it. But there was a real fellowship between God and Enoch in their relationship with each other. And this is how we should strive. I mean, we should strive to have a real relationship with God. And I like it, one old preacher way back there somewhere, I can't remember who it was. I can't even remember exactly how he said it, but he was preaching or teaching on this, and he said, one day God and Enoch went for a walk, and God just said, Enoch, instead of going back home, why don't you just come on and go with me, and he just took him on home. But also, so that kind of is a good segue for me. So again, over here in Genesis, it says in verse 24, it says Enoch walked with God and he was not, because God took him. And also in Hebrews 11:5, it says the same thing, that God took him. And the implication there is that God just translated Enoch into the next life. That Enoch did not die. Enoch did not pass through death. That God just translated him into the next life. And I got to keep all my notes straight here because I'm not really following them. A couple of things about this. Let me do a couple of easy things first. Actually, none of them were easy. But when you're in seminary and you're studying like Old Testament Jewish, I guess theology is the right word, I can remember being taught that the Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew religion, didn't really have a concept of an afterlife. But the more I read in the Old Testament, I really kind of disagree with that. Right here, they would have understood that there was an afterlife if Enoch was just taken to go be with God. They would have clearly understood that there was a next life. And also Job. And I thought of this a while ago, and I didn't look up the verse, but you can look it up. I promise you it's in there. And Job is considered to be, really it's considered to be the earliest book written that we have. And there's a passage in there that Job says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at last he will stand on this earth. And then he says, and this I know, that in my flesh I will see God. Job says, this I know, that in my flesh I will see God. So Job understood that there was another life as well. So I really do think that they did have an understanding that there was another life and that there was a life after this, and they couldn't help but have it. So let me throw this out at you. Maybe, just maybe, the way God took Enoch is a preview of the way God's going to take his church. Think about that. Maybe that's a rapture preview. Sounds good to me too. Maybe that's a rapture preview. Maybe it's kind of, this is the way that God is going to take his church. Now, let me do this, and I'm sure you've heard this before. That's okay, I'm going to do it. Before I forget, let me do this. Let me read Jude, the book of Jude, verses 14 and 15. Jude is right before Revelation. Jude only has one chapter, so it's Jude 14 and 15. It says, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men also, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So, I think it was last week, if you remember, that I pointed out the scripture that refers to Abel as a prophet. And, so when we think of prophets, we usually pick them up about Isaiah, right? Or Elijah and Elisha. We pick them up in there somewhere, some of those guys. But let me tell you something. Abel was a prophet, and according to this, Enoch was a prophet. It says that Enoch prophesied about these people. And listen, it said that he prophesied about the Lord coming with 10,000s of his saints. He prophesied about the Lord coming with his saints. Listen, that's about as New Testament as it comes. That's about as New Testament second coming as it is, as it can get. And Enoch, way back there, before the flood, seventh from Adam, is prophesying about this stuff. Now, seventh from Adam could be, like 6,000 years. I mean, it's not 6,000, but it's a long time considering how long they all lived. That's not fair for me to do it like that, because they didn't just live because Adam, he was born when Adam was whatever. Anyhow.
This is crawling down a little bit more further into that rabbit hole, but if you kind of cross-reference the ideas in where it's referenced, like in Jude, there the book of Enoch is referenced with those verses, those two verses that said.
Those may be the verses that I read that.
They're part of
Yeah.
some that are in Enoch.
Yeah.
Enoch saw the fallen angels, or saw evidence in heaven, in here, and he knew that I think that he knew what was coming, because he could see it all. God showed him a lot of stuff.
Right. So the other thing you may have heard, you probably have heard, and you're about to hear it again, and I'm sure when we went through Revelation, I'm sure I did this. So there are, in Revelation, in chapter 11, and we're going to look here in a second, there are two evangelists that are going to appear in the end times. Two Hebrew evangelists that are going to appear supernaturally. They're going to begin to preach the gospel, and they're going to be killed. All right, and then 3 days later, they're going to be raised from the dead. Now, there's a lot of speculation about who these guys are. The Bible in Hebrews says that it is appointed unto man once to die. Well, how does Enoch get out of that? Is he going to escape having to die? I don't know. Hebrews says that it's appointed unto man once to die. There's one other person in the Old Testament who didn't die, that God just took him home. Anybody want to? Elijah. So you have these two guys, Enoch and Elijah. Both of them did not die a physical death on this earth. Both of them were just taken by God. Now let me read a couple of scriptures for you. I'm going to read one, and then we're going to go read the one in Revelation 11. But the first one I'm going to read is in Zechariah. Zechariah. See if I can find Zechariah first of all. Is it Zechariah that I want? Yes, it is. Zechariah. Okay. And the reason I went, it's because I really need to read the whole chapter. But so Zechariah has this vision. And in this vision, there's this lampstand. Oh, gosh. Let me read it. Starting in verse 1. The angel who talked with me came back, and he wakened me as a man who wakened. And he said to me, what do you see? And I said, I'm looking, and there's a lampstand of solid gold with a bowl on top of it. And on the lampstand, 7 lamps with 7 pipes to the 7 lamps. And 2 olive trees are by it, one on the right of the bowl and the other at its left. And so he said, what are these, my Lord? And the angel talked with me, and he said, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my Lord. And he said, this is the word of Zerubbabel. This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. So what he's seeing is a vision, and he's seeing a vision of the Spirit of God being poured out on the people of God, and there are especially these 2 olive trees. In verse 11, he says, then I answered and I said to him, well, what are these 2 olive trees at the right of the left stand and at its left? And it says, I further answered and said to him, what are these 2 olive branches that drip into the receptacles of the golden pipes from the golden oil, from which the golden oil drains? And he said to me, well, do you not know what these are? And he said, no, my Lord. And he said, these are 2 anointed ones who stand beside the Lord of the whole earth. So this is the verse I want you to remember. So in his vision, who are these olive trees? Who are these olive branches that are dripping this oil? And the angel tells him, these are 2 anointed ones who stand beside the Lord of the whole earth. 2 anointed ones. Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11. Is it chapter 11? It's not chapter 11. Yeah, it is. Chapter 11. I scared myself for a minute. He's given a rod in verse 1. He's told to measure the temple of God. So he measures it. And then verse 3 picks up. He says, I'm going to give power to my 2 witnesses. They will prophesy 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. Listen to verse 4. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands standing before the God of the earth. So he clearly says that whoever these 2 witnesses are, they are the anointed ones who are in Zechariah's vision, who are standing on each side of the lampstands in the throne of God. And then it just says, if anyone wants to harm them, fire comes out of their mouth and devours their enemies. If anybody wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. They have the power to shut up heaven so that no rain falls for days of their prophecy. They have the power over waters to turn them to blood, to strike the earth with plagues as often as they desire. When they finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war against them, overcome them, and kill them. Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom in Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. And then those from the peoples of the tribes and tongues and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days, not allow their dead bodies to be put in the graves. Those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them, make merry, send gifts to one another, because the 2 prophets, tormented those who dwell on the earth. After 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. So we have these two anointed ones who are going to be great witnesses at the end. Now, a lot of people would say Moses. And a lot of people would say Elijah and Moses. If you noticed in Revelation chapter 11, it gave two examples of things they could do. One is they could call fire down from heaven. Well, who did that? Elijah. And then it says they could do plagues like turning water into blood. Well, who did that? Moses. So a lot of people say it was going to be Elijah and Moses. When Jesus went up on the Mount of Transfiguration, who was there with him? Moses and Elijah. So a lot of people say it's going to be Moses and Elijah. But I just can't leave Enoch out based on the fact that he never died.
But the two witnesses are Elijah and Moses. They do die.
Right.
On the streets of Jerusalem.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's what I'm saying is that they have to come back so they can die. They have to, because Hebrews says it's appointed unto man to die once, that they have to come back so that they can actually die a physical death. And that's why I'm saying that, yeah. They do, because you're right, they do die in Jerusalem. And everybody has a big party. All over the world, there's going to be a big party.
They even give gifts.
Giving gifts. It's going to be like Christmas. And then 3.5 days later, oops. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else about anything about Enoch, Elijah, whatever? Either one of those guys.
If Enoch was such a godly man as Moses and Elijah, God's not through with Moses and Elijah. We read in Revelation, He's got plans for those two.
Right.
Why didn't He put Enoch in there somewhere doing these godly things?
Right. Right.
We hear no more of him.
That's exactly right. We don't.
There was a coincidence between previous chapter and this chapter that from Cain's genealogy, there was an Enoch and a Lamech.
Right. Yeah. So I actually read about that. That there are some similar names in Cain's genealogy and now also in Seth's. There really wasn't a solid answer other than those just might have been popular names. But you're right. There are some common names between the two. In fact, Lamech, so Enoch Enoch begat Methuselah. What's Methuselah known for? Yeah. So look at Methuselah 25. Methuselah lived 187 years and he begot Lamech. And after he begot Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 960 years and he died. Yeah, 69 years. You're right. My misreading jumped in on me there. 969 years and he died. Methuselah. So Methuselah, there's a little discrepancy. Of course, we know him because he's the oldest man that ever lived. There's a little discrepancy about what his name means. Some people believe that his name means a man of the spear. That it means man of the spirit. And I don't know. But there is another belief that his name means it shall be sent. And that in some ways, Enoch was naming him in a prophetic way about the coming judgment of God by flood. Because Methuselah is going to have Lamech, and Lamech is going to have, guess who? Noah. So Methuselah is going to be Noah's grandpa. And not only that, Methuselah is going to die, if I read this right, and I didn't do the math, but he died right before the flood came, like a year before the flood came or something like that, that he died just right before the actual flood. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I can't say for sure certain that his name means it shall be sent, but I think it would be kind of neat if Enoch did name him that prophetically. I do believe Enoch was a prophet. The Bible calls him a prophet over there in Jude. That he prophetically named him that in prophecy of a coming judgment of God, that it was going to be sent, and certainly that judgment does come. Pick up verse 22. Lamech lived 182 years and had a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord cursed." After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Lamech has Noah, and so Lamech, he's not really called a prophet, but he gives some prophetic words, I believe, in verse 29. It says that he had a son, he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed." So it's almost prophetic, it's a prophecy, but he was prophesying that, well, he said that Noah was going to give them comfort, but specifically he was saying, because of the ground that the Lord has cursed. Well, so the Lord's going to destroy the ground. He's going to destroy the earth, which has been cursed. The problem is the curse isn't taken away yet, right? The curse isn't going to be taken away until God comes again, Christ comes again, and removes that curse. But again, it's just some prophetic words that he has. Also, well, I don't know. Noah. The name Noah means rest. Thought that was kind of interesting, that the name Noah means rest, and certainly. But there was something that I was reading, and I had never really considered this. This isn't theologically important. It's just something that I just, Noah, of course, it says Noah was 500 years old when he begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right. Now, does it say in chapter 6 anywhere? I'm assuming that Noah had other kids other than Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I'm assuming he had other kids, because all the others had kids all the way through. They started having kids. About 130 seems to be the magic number. I guess I should have waited. But the assumption is that, but even if he didn't have other kids, we know that he had brothers and sisters, because it says that Lamech had other sons and daughters. So we know that he had brothers and sisters. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he probably had other children. But guess what? It's only the families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth that get on the ark. I want you to think about that for a second. Only the families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth get on the ark. Any other brothers and sisters he had, guess what? They died in the flood. Any other kids he may have had, guess what? They died in the flood. And I just had never thought about that before, about how must Noah have felt about that. And surely, he begged them to get on the boat. Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think? Surely. He begged any brothers and sisters, any family members, surely. He said, you have got to get on this boat. It's coming. It's going to happen. And you have got to get on this boat. And they just didn't do it. They just didn't do it. I was reminded of, it's actually in Genesis 19:14. It's not the exact same scenario, because in the case of Lot had Lot had probably been living a very compromised life, and I don't want to indicate that Noah had been living a compromised life, because I don't think he had. But it just reminded me of, when the angels went into Sodom, and Lot took him in his house, and he's trying to look out for him, and they finally tell him, they say, look, you got to get out of here, because we're fixing to destroy this place. They said, you need to get your family and you need to get out of here. And in verse 14, he goes to his sons-in-laws, because they're married to his daughters, and he tells them, we got to go. And they laugh at him. In fact, the verse says they thought he was joking. And obviously, probably because his life had been so compromised. Noah's wasn't, but it just reminded me of the same sort of thing, that, he had to leave without some of his family, and judgment fell. Noah had to get on that boat without some of his family, and judgment fell. And that had to be heart-wrenching for Noah. Boy, what a downer way to end this lesson. But that's where I'm ending. No. I don't know. Will, you act like you want to say something.
Yes. I was looking at, you said the walk with God.
Yeah.
Something interesting about Noah. In 6:9 it says, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man.
Right.
Perfect in his generation.
Right.
Noah walked with God.
Right.
So that gives you an idea of what walking with God.
And see, these are all from that line of Seth. All of these people, and I think we looked last week at, it said, I think it was after Seth, it said it was at that time that men began to call on the name of the Lord. Seth becomes the originator of that seed, that they're looking for from the prophecy in the garden. He will bruise your heel, but you will crush his head. They're looking for that seed. And so, and that's why when she got Seth, she named him, she said, God has given me another seed than Abel, because Eve was looking, she was looking for it. It's not funny how, but from the moment, and I brought this out last week, from the moment that they got the prophecy of that there was going to come a seed from Eve that was going to win the victory, they began to look for it immediately. She looked for it in Cain and Abel. She named Cain, what did I say it meant? She named Cain. She thought Cain was it, right? Obviously that was wrong. But then she got Seth. And she goes, okay, Seth is it. He's given me another one. And so Seth truly did become the one that through his lineage men would begin to call upon the name of the Lord. Chapter 4, verse 25. Adam knew his wife again. She bore a son. They named him Seth, because God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born. They named him Enosh. And then men began to call on the name of the Lord. So this becomes that lineage where people would begin to seek God. So you're going to have Enoch, who walks with God, and you're going to have Noah, who is righteous and just, and that sort of thing. And Lamech as well. And Methuselah. And all of them, I guess.
I thought it was interesting too, in chapter 5, he said, that God made Adam in his own likeness.
Right.
And then in 3, it said Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness.
Right. After his likeness. Not God's likeness. Right. Right.
He named himself.
Right. Anything else? So chapter 6 is about Noah. And so we will look at chapter 6, the building of the ark being prepared. And then they got to start over.